if there was way less time and budget, what sacrifices could be made to finish this requirement faster? And I have an answer, but I'll let you answer first.
It doesn't really work that way. Like, if there were less time and budget globally across the game, you want to use the Robin Hitchcock from The Cure rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
And allocate sufficient reasonable amounts of time to everything to bring them all up to a particular level, right? And so if you told me, well, you only have a week to do water or something, I'd be like, well, that's going to put water out of phase with everything else. So let's take some time away from something else and put it on water. However, I have another level of answer to that, which is, so Casey, you used to go to GDC, right?
Yeah, back when it didn't suck as much.
Yeah, I used to go to GDC also. And even back then, we thought it was pretty terrible.
Not in the, so what I will say is 97, 98-ish, right after it got taken over, but before they had time to turn it to crap.
Yeah.
It was
all right.
Kind of amazing.
I still remember, it was a long time ago, but I remember talking to Charles. It was probably like 2000 or 2001 or something. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I just went to see a movie in the middle of the day because the conference sucks. I was like, yeah, I get you. I know where you're coming from. Mm-hmm. Okay, so back when we used to go to GDC, one thing you will learn from the wise people at GDC Lecturing Incorporated is that you have to scope your game, all right? What you will learn from these people is that whatever brilliant, amazing ideas you have for a game at the outset, they will tell you over and over that you can't do all those things, and that 2/3 of the way through development, you'll find that you have to dump half your game on the floor and then stitch the rest of it together and rescue that and somehow ship that, right? And then a lot of these games are like Metacritic 65 and don't even make any money when the reason you shipped them out the door was ostensibly to make money. And then a lot of these people, the company name on their badge, when they went to speak at GDC, that company doesn't exist anymore. All right?
Okay.
So I'm just saying, question the advice a little bit, right? And so since I started my new way of game design, right, which fortunately we're still able to do because people bought The Witness, right? I have never scoped a game, where I'm making air quotes with my finger. Scoping a game means to cut it down from what you wanted to make to what you actually can make. Both Braid and The Witness went the other way. They both got bigger. Braid certainly, maybe not in terms of number of levels. I didn't know how big it was going to be in terms of levels, but in terms of feature set and, how much time we spent making it look nice and all that, we did way more, right? And then with The Witness, it's just a massively bigger game. We thought it would be at most, I figured it might be a 20-hour game because Braid was like a 5-hour game, and making a game 4 times as big would be huge. But it's if you play everything in The Witness, it's easily a 100-hour game unless you're really fast at puzzles. It's just huge. So the way I like to see it is, look, if you're going to put a lot of effort into something anyway, it's not easy to make games, right? Even now with Unity Game Engine, where you press the Make Game button, if you do that, you just have the same thing everybody else has when they press the Make Game button, which isn't very good, right? So it's hard to get to a point where you're even able to release something that's notable in any way, right? It takes you a decent amount of time and effort to get there. So why would you then waste the opportunity that you spent getting there by just firing it off a little too early and having it not be that good? Right? Because then it'll take you, I don't know, did it take you 2 years to get to that point? It's going to take you another 2 years before you can get to that point again and have another attempt at maybe being able to make something good. And so if your response every time is, I got to scope this because it's been 2 years or whatever, then, the strategy you are undergoing has an obvious result. Right. And we just see that over people's careers in the games industry. And And nobody stops to question that. That said, I'm notorious for taking a long time doing game projects, and you don't have to take as long as we do, especially if you don't insist on building your own engine all the time and all these things. Although it does help with quality if you build your own engine. So like these are all decisions that you can make. I don't know. I feel like I've answered that question to a reasonable degree at this point.
So next question is oh, sorry.
Do you have anything to say about that? About the whole scoping thing? And because I know you're working on your own thing that you've been working on for a long time, and I don't think you feel like scoping it, right?
So I guess what I would say is that I have mixed feelings about this. Here are my feelings about it. So I think scoping your life/company is incredibly important, and scoping your game is completely unimportant, is I guess the way I would say it. Because when I try to assess like what makes things I'm working on late, it's almost always that like I had too many other things to do. Does that make sense?
Are you saying that work-life balance causes you to not get work done? Or
no, more like work balance, right?
Work balance.
So like, it's really hard to do like Handmade Hero, for example, and also work on a hard technical problem, because oftentimes like you need to be able to go for like a month of time where your brain is literally focused just on this one thing, right?
I agree. And I actually don't get to do that at all these days because I'm doing a compiler and
exactly
engine and a game. And it does affect the quality of work, like no question.
Yes. And I think the problem is that, so one thing I will say, like from what you just talked about, is I would say, but you do kind of scope your game a little bit, right, John? Because you didn't pick the hardest possible technical game to do along with your compiler, right? And that was a smart decision because you could have picked a more technically ambitious game, right? You easily could have if you'd wanted to. We could easily come up with games that would have been worse than this one. Now, granted, as you normally do, you always go like, let me push what I can do in this game to the limit.
Yeah.
But you didn't go, let me also make the massively multiplayer online first person infinite view distance 1,000 people per server game, right? Which you could have done if you weren't trying to say, let me pick the easiest to scope of my ideas to go with my compiler.
Yes. Well,
that was a smart decision, right?
I would like to use a different verb for that because I think of those as relatively orthogonal things.
Okay.
Like, yeah, you absolutely should be smart at the outset about what you're deciding to build.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the canonical newbie mistake is like, a kid gets out of school and wants to get in video games and wants to make the super MMO sports spaceship game or what, just like put everything in there. And it's like, well, actually, it's very difficult to do what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is universal, right? It's very hard to make games, and you need to respect that going in. Even going back to Braid, though, when I did Braid, it was like, look, I have this history of not finishing projects. How do I help ensure that I finish this one? I'm going to do a 2D game because I don't want to deal with 3D, right?
Yep.
That was like a foundational decision, and it paid off, right? Like that's just what that was. So that is true. That is different, however, than like giving up on your dreams in the middle of development.
Yep.
Sort of. I mean, you could have a hybrid of those things where it's like, I guess I'm learning now what is practically able to be accomplished. And when I made this decision early on, I didn't really know. But the people who lecture for GDC Lecturing Incorporated LLC don't really have that excuse because they've made like 4 games before or whatever. They should know. And they still say, well, you have to scope your game every time. And I'm like, no, just make a better decision about what you're going to build, or work in a situation where you're not as constrained, right? Which also has implications on what you can build, right? Like I cannot build Assassin's Creed Ragnarok or whatever, because like I just don't have that kind of money, right?
Yeah.
I could build an indie version of an Assassin's Creed game with that kind of gameplay, but like I just can't build those huge maps full of you know, historically accurate things.
Yeah.
But because I don't try to do that, we have money to pay people to stay employed for extra years beyond, you know, what we originally would have scheduled or whatever, which is why we don't have to like scope the game in the GDC lecture sense. All right.
Yeah.
Way too much on this point, I think.